Harry Potter and the Elder Wizard, Chapter 1, The Dream. The dream transported Harry to a barren landscape, under a sky devoid of stars. Before him, a mountain ablaze with fire dominated the horizon, its flames casting an ominous glow on the surroundings. The sight was terrifying. Amidst the fiery roar of enormous black dragons and the poisonous fumes of darkness, figures emerged cloaked in black, flying dreadful scaled bird-like creatures, emanating a dread far surpassing any Dementor's chill as they silently circled the mountain. In this dream, two figures caught Harry's attention. One was a tall, old man with a flowing white beard and robes that shimmered in the red light of the fires below, standing like an ancient mighty king upon the edge of doom. Next to him was a smaller figure, terror upon his face, frozen where he stood in fear. In a moment that chilled Harry to the bone, the tall figure lifted the smaller one, casting him towards the fiery mountain. As the scene shifted, Harry found himself in a village of small, jovial beings, their laughter a stark contrast to the previous scene. They lived in peace, untouched by the darkness of the mountain. But the dream took a final, unsettling turn. Harry saw a figure emerging from the shadows, a man with a bald head and the snake-like features of Lord Voldemort. This sight jolted Harry. The Voldemort he knew had long, straight white hair, a stark contrast to the bald figure before him. The strangeness was deeply disconcerting, leaving Harry with a sense of profound confusion. As the vision of the bald Voldemort loomed in his mind, Harry's dream abruptly ended. He was jolted awake by Ron shaking him violently. "Harry, wake up. We're going to be late for Slughorn's class," Ron shouted, a note of urgency in his voice. Harry's eyes snapped open, his breath coming in short gasps. He was drenched, the remnants of the nightmare clinging to him like the sweat upon his skin. The vivid images from his dream, the fiery mountain, the mysterious figures, and the chilling appearance of a bald Voldemort lingered in his mind, a stark contrast to the normality of the Gryffindor dormitory. "What time is it?" Harry managed to stammer, his heart still racing from the remnants of the dream. "It's nearly time for potions, mate. You were thrashing around in your sleep. Bad dream?" Ron asked, his eyebrows knitted in concern as he took in Harry's disheveled appearance. Harry nodded, trying to shake off the unsettling feelings the dream had evoked. "Yeah, a really weird one. But I'll tell you about it later. We need to hurry." Scrambling out of bed, Harry quickly pulled on his robes and together, he and Ron dashed out of the dormitory, making their way through the corridors of Hogwarts. As they hurried to Professor Slughorn's classroom, Harry's mind was a whirlwind of questions about the dream. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The threat of Voldemort had been growing ever since his return had been witnessed at the Ministry. Since then, there had been an increase in attacks as close as Hogsmeade, and the entire wizarding community had been in a panic, with fear of inevitably losing the war. Harry, Ron, and Hermione put away their things as the bell sounded signaling the end of their potions class. It had been another major triumph for Harry, as he once again managed to impress Professor Slughorn with a perfectly brewed dream-enhancing potion. His success due to the useful notes scribbled in the margins of his Half-Blood Prince potions books. Hermione looked down at the book in his hands in disgust. He knew full well she considered his advantage nothing short of cheating. He looked at the mysterious handwriting again that had led him through one tough potion after another, feeling thankful and curious about the unknown Half-Blood Prince. The Great Hall buzzed with the usual chatter and clatter of lunchtime as students filled their plates from the magically replenished dishes. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat together, discussing Harry's peculiar dream and the significance it could hold. "I'm telling you, Hermione, it felt more real than anything I've seen before. But what do you think it means?" "I don't know, but whatever it is, I doubt it's good." You have to tell Professor Dumbledore about it. He's got enough on his plate." As they finished their meal, a hush fell over the hall. All eyes turned to the staff table where Professor Dumbledore had stood up, his expression grave yet composed. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath, expecting the worst as they had become accustomed. "My dear students," Dumbledore began, his voice carrying through the hall. "As you are all aware, the news of current events outside our walls is grave. The threat from Voldemort and his supporters is growing, and our priority must always be your safety and well-being." A murmur ran through the students. The mention of Voldemort's name still had the power to unsettle, despite Dumbledore's calm demeanor. "Therefore," Dumbledore continued, "we are making some changes to our staff to ensure the security of Hogwarts and to provide you with the best possible education in these trying times." Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged foreboding glances. Professor Slughorn, who has generously shared his knowledge and expertise with us this year, will be leaving us, Dumbledore announced, gesturing towards Slughorn, who nodded solemnly to the students. A ripple of surprise and murmurs swept through the hall. Slughorn had been a popular figure, despite his eccentricities. He waved from the top table, acknowledging the sounds of disappointments from small pockets around the hall. To replace him, Professor Snape will return to his role as the Master of Potions, Dumbledore said, indicating Snape, whose expression remained inscrutable. The murmurs grew louder. Snape returning to potions was unexpected, but not entirely surprising. And to fill the role of defense against the dark arts teacher, Dumbledore paused for effect. We will be welcoming a new member to our faculty. This exceptional individual will no doubt be an invaluable addition in these times. The hall erupted in whispers and speculation. The defense against the dark arts position was notorious for its high turnover, and the identity of the new professor was a topic of immediate interest. The great hall, abuzz with speculation and hushed conversations, fell silent as the doors swung open with a dramatic flourish. All heads turned to see the thin figure who had made such an entrance. In strode an elderly man, his long white hair dropping down to his waist, and his attire was of a pure, dazzling white, complemented by a long staff that seemed to radiate an aura of power. Harry's eyes widened in shock. That's him. The man from my dream. I saw him throwing a child into a fire, he whispered in fear and disbelief. That's him. Ron and Hermione turned to him, their expressions a mixture of shock and confusion. What? Hermione asked, her brow furrowed in concern. Before Harry could respond, Dumbledore rose from his seat, his face alight with a welcoming smile. "Ah, Professor, you're earlier than we expected," he said, his voice resonating excitedly through the hall. The old man stopped before the high table, his eyes scanning the room with a sharp, penetrating gaze. "A wizard is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to," responded the stranger in a voice both raspy and mysterious. His words perceptibly carrying more depth and authority than those of their headmaster. The students, staff, and even the ghosts of Hogwarts looked on in fascination as Dumbledore gestured for the newcomer to join them at the staff table. The atmosphere in the Great Hall was electric with curiosity and a hint of apprehension. Who was this mysterious figure, and what did his arrival mean for Hogwarts? After exchanging a few words with the newcomer, Dumbledore turned once again to the hall. "Please give a warm welcome to Professor Gandalf, who joins us from distant lands," he announced. "I am confident he will bring a wealth of knowledge and experience that you may all profit greatly from," announced Dumbledore before once again resuming his seat. From the corner of his eye, Harry noticed Snape's expression. It was one of barely concealed disdain. Ron, following Harry's gaze, leaned in and whispered, "He doesn't look very happy." "Well, He's just lost the job he waited over a decade for." "I'm not surprised," Hermione responded in a low voice, her eyes fixed on Snape. Turning back to the staff table, Harry's attention was drawn to Professor Gandalf, who had produced a long smoking pipe and was in the process of lighting it. Professor McGonagall, sitting beside him, wore a look of mild disapproval, her lips pursed in a silent reprimand. "Gandalf? I've never heard of him." "Have you, Hermione?" Harry asked, his curiosity piqued. "No, I don't think so," Hermione replied, her brow furrowed in thought. "He doesn't appear in any of the books I've read." As the three of them watched, Professor Gandalf took a deep puff from his pipe, sending a small cloud of smoke into the air. The sight was so out of place in the Great Hall that the entire hall looked on in silence, transfixed. "We'd better go before we're late for class," Hermione said finally, breaking the spell of the moment. The trio stood up, still exchanging speculative glances and theories about the new professor. As they made their way out of the Great Hall, Harry couldn't shake the feeling that Professor Gandalf's arrival was more significant than a simple staff change. "Don't forget you have your lesson with Dumbledore this evening, Harry." Harry nodded. "I'll see you both later." Later that evening, as his lesson with Dumbledore drew to a close, both headmaster and students sat across from one another, at opposing ends of his enormous desk, discussing the significance of the most recent memory Dumbledore had managed to procure. "Well, Harry, I think that's enough for today. It is enough to understand that Voldemort split his soul into multiple pieces and hid those pieces. We'll continue where we left off next time," smiled Dumbledore. "Off to bed now." But Harry couldn't resist asking the burning question on his mind. "Professor, I have a question." "Yes." "Who is Professor Gandalf?" Dumbledore paused, his fingers forming a triangle in front of him as he regarded Harry over the top of his glasses. His eyes seemed to delve into a deeper, more distant place. "Professor Gandalf," he began slowly, "is a bit of an enigma, even to myself, I must admit. He applied for the role of defense against the dark arts teacher, and due to the lack of alternative candidates, I had no choice but to accept." "But who is he, Professor?" "I've never heard of him." Dumbledore again paused before responding. "It is not my place to say, Harry. You have your first lesson with him tomorrow. Perhaps you can ask him yourself." Harry nodded. It was clear Dumbledore would say no more on the matter. "Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Harry?" Harry hesitated for a moment, wondering whether he should tell Dumbledore about his dream, but decided against it. "No, Professor." "Off to bed, then. Tomorrow awaits." Harry Potter and the Elder Wizard Chapter 2, The White Wizard. The arrival of Professor Gandalf at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry set the ancient school abuzz with whispers and excitement. For Harry, Ron, and Hermione, the curiosity was almost unbearable, but they wouldn't have to wait long for answers. Their first class that morning was with Professor Gandalf, and as they sat at the Gryffindor table for breakfast, their eyes were drawn to the staff table where Gandalf sat. He had finished his meal and was now surveying the Great Hall intensely. His long silver beard flowed down his chest, and his eyes, sharp and perceptive, seemed alert as ever on this gloomy morning. Gandalf's presence was formidable, exuding a sense of wisdom and power that even surpassed that of their headmaster. 15 minutes later, they quietly filed into the classroom. Professor Gandalf sat at his desk, holding a crystal ball in one hand, a calm, almost serene expression on his face beneath his incredibly bushy eyebrows. The room hushed as he stood up. "Greetings, young students of Hogwarts," Gandalf's voice vibrating through the room, causing the hairs on the back of their necks to stand up. His voice had an ancient depth to it, like a valley of time filled with all the ages of the world gone by and the echoes of battles fought. I come to share with you the knowledge and wisdom I have gathered throughout my long life and journeys in Middle-earth and the Undying Lands. The students, including Harry, Ron, and Hermione, leaned forward, pulled in by his presence. Gandalf's mention of Middle-earth and Undying Lands sparked a wave of murmurs and exchanged glances. "It is many years since I have been in such a gathering of young minds," Gandalf continued, his eyes sweeping across the room. "But perhaps you first wish to know who I am and where it is that I come from. So, I will tell you my tale. Well, part of it, for the full tale is known by none, and I have forgotten much over the years." As he spoke, Gandalf began weaving a tale that was both spellbinding and fantastical. He spoke of ancient civilizations, of realms that existed beyond the confines of their known world, of mythical creatures that roamed vast and uncharted lands. His words painted vivid pictures in the minds of his listeners, transporting them to places they had never imagined. The tales of Middle-earth, with its heroes and villains, its battles and adventures, ignited the imaginations of everyone in the room. Harry and Ron exchanged looks of awe and wonder, but Hermione put up her hand. "Professor, Mrs. Cotton, Granger, actually, sir, there's nothing about any of this in any of the books I've read. Nothing about a Middle-earth, hobbits, the Shire, or Mordor. Nothing about destroying anyone's rings, sir." The classroom was silent for a moment as Hermione's words hung in the air. There was a collective sense of disbelief mixed with fascination and rationalization. Gandalf nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Indeed, Miss Granger, you are correct. The tales and histories of Middle-earth are not to be found in your library or any known to the wizarding world. These are stories from a time and a place far removed from your own, from an age that predates the known history of magic as you understand it, predating recorded history itself, and there are some rings which are not meant to be destroyed." He finished with a wink. The students exchanged bewildered looks, slightly unsettled. Gandalf's gaze swept across the room, his eyes reflecting the depth of his knowledge. "The world I come from, the world of Middle-earth, existed nearly 50,000 years ago. It was a time of great heroes and terrible villains, of epic battles and profound magic. The tales of that age have been lost to time, save for a few who remember and carry them forward." Harry, Ron, and Hermione listened intently. Harry's thoughts were on the dream he had had of the fiery mountain, the dark riders, and the figure of Gandalf himself. Could it be that his dream was a glimpse into this ancient world? Hermione's hand shot up again. "But Professor, how is it possible for you to be here, in our time? How did you travel from your world to ours?" Gandalf leaned against his desk, his eyes momentarily distant, as if recalling a long-forgotten memory. "I have remained enduring while all others perished." Ron, who had been silent, finally spoke up. "But why are you here, Professor? Why come to Hogwarts?" Gandalf's expression turned serious. "I am here because the fate of your world stands upon the edge of a knife. If uncorrected, it too will fall to darkness and ruin. Your world is ill-equipped to fight such foes. I am here to aid you in your fight against it, to share the wisdom of my age with yours. In my class you shall learn a new magic, far more powerful and ancient than the feeble sorcery you now consider magic. Dumbledore's army is strong, but Gandalf's is stronger still." The bell rang, signaling the end of the class, but no one moved. They were all too absorbed in Gandalf's words. "Fly, you fools," said Gandalf with a smile, and the students immediately rose from their seats and began leaving the classroom, almost as if compelled by a hidden power in the old wizard's voice. As the days turned into weeks, Gandalf's presence at Hogwarts became a transformative force. Not content with simply teaching the standard magic expected at the school, instead, he delved into the depths of ancient and forgotten arts. He unraveled the mysteries of elven enchantments, revealing the intricate and ethereal nature of their magic. He brought to light the secrets of dwarven runes, showcasing the earthy and powerful essence that lay within their craft. And with great care and caution, he explored the dark arts, not to encourage their usage, but to impart a deeper understanding of their allure and dangers. In his classes, Gandalf imparted his own extraordinary magic, surpassing the potency and power of the conventional spells used in the world. He pushed the students to venture beyond the ordinary, urging them to challenge themselves and delve into the depths of their untapped potential. Gandalf emphasized the importance of resilience, teaching them to confront and triumph over obstacles. His teachings transcended the confines of the prescribed curriculum, interweaving profound lessons of morality, courage, and the unyielding strength of fellowship. With each passing day, Gandalf's wisdom and experiences became increasingly apparent. He not only led his students on expeditions to the Forbidden Forest, where they had the rare opportunity to encounter magical creatures and witness the importance of coexistence and harmony, but he also regaled them with tales of long-ago adventures with the Ents and Gwaihir the Windlord. Gandalf's insatiable curiosity kindled their own as he presented them with ancient artifacts, challenging them to decipher forgotten runes and unlock the long-lost secrets of powerful enchantments. Outside the classroom, Gandalf became a steadfast pillar of support for his students, readily offering counsel and guidance to those in need. His door was always open, some students joking he had forgotten how to shut it, and many sought solace in his wise words, finding comfort and reassurance as he provided a puff of Old Toby while offering his invaluable guidance. Gandalf keenly perceived the sparks of greatness within everyone, nurturing an environment where they could flourish, grow, and harness their true potential. Under the guidance of Gandalf, Neville Longbottom grew remarkably in confidence, embracing challenges that once seemed insurmountable. Gandalf recognized resilience and determination within Longbottom, fostering for him an environment where he could flourish and hone his magical skills. Neville's progress was nothing short of extraordinary, and as he excelled in his studies and displayed unwavering courage in the face of adversity, the title of Neville the Brown was bestowed upon him in homage to his mastery over the earth arts. Ron Weasley, once known for his moments of self-doubt, flourished under Gandalf's guidance as well. Impressed by Ron's unwavering loyalty and heart, Gandalf playfully bestowed upon him the title of Ron Wise Gamgee. One afternoon, as class began filing out, Gandalf beckoned Harry to stay back for a moment. As the other students left the room, Goyle knocked over an enormous pile of books perched precariously on Gandalf's desk as he walked past. "Fool of a took," bellowed Gandalf. "I have not passed through fire and death to teach clumsy wizards to mind their footing." Goyle looked mortified. "Fly, you fool." Goyle bolted from the room in fear. "Granger, Gamgee, do pick up those books for me." As Hermione bent down to help, she was filled with curiosity. She had never seen any of these books before, neither in Flourish and Blots or in the restricted section of the library. There was an enormous book titled There and Back Again, A Hobbit's Tale and the Ancient Runes of Durin's Folk. She picked this last one up and examined with interest, catching Gandalf's eye, which twinkled. "Young witch," he said, a smile playing on his lips. "The mysteries of ancient runes are indeed fascinating. But be warned, deciphering them can be as perplexing as navigating the mines of Moria. Now be off and don't forget your homework." "Not you," said Gandalf, nodding at Harry, who approached the teacher's desk as Gandalf took a seat, indicating for Harry to pull up a chair. "Potter," Gandalf said, his voice gentle yet tinged with concern, "it is time you and I talked. Take a seat." "Yes, Professor." Suddenly, there was an almighty crack in the room, the noise of which reverberated against the heavy stone walls, causing Gandalf to fall off his chair in fright. In the middle of the room stood Dobby. After barking a sting of expletives, Gandalf returned to his chair, looking at the stunted creature with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Harry, still seated, watched the exchange with a mix of shock and amusement. The abrupt arrival of Dobby, coupled with Gandalf's reaction and the profanity-filled tirade directed towards Dobby about house elves, took him by complete surprise. "Dobby is sorry if he frightened Professor, sir." "Dobby, it's all right," Harry quickly said, trying to ease the tension. "Professor Gandalf, this is Dobby, a free house elf and a friend. He's been of great help to us in the past." Gandalf looked at Dobby, his expression softening. "Ah, a free elf, you say? I see now that much has changed. How your kind has diminished. Upon a time, you stood among the wise and mighty, but alas, your blood has mingled with that of the goblins." Dobby nodded, still looking a bit shaken. "Dobby came to deliver a message to Harry Potter, sir. Professor Dumbledore requires Harry Potter immediately." "Thank you, Dobby," Harry said, standing up. He turned to Gandalf. "Professor, I'm sorry, but I must go." Gandalf nodded. "Very well, Potter. We will have our talk another time. But heed my warning before you go. Your enemy Voldemort is not what he seems. There is more at play than you perceive. Go." As Harry hurried out of the classroom, his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Gandalf's knowledge of history and magic was unlike anything he had encountered before. Harry's thoughts were interrupted as he arrived at Dumbledore's office. The headmaster greeted him with his usual calm demeanor, but there was a sense of urgency in his eyes, gesturing him to his usual seat. "Harry, I have called you here urgently because of news which requires our fullest attention. Voldemort and his forces are preparing an attack that could strike any moment upon this castle. We are running out of time. I am running out of time. We cannot wait any longer. I must tell you the tale of the Deathly Hallows before it is too late." Harry sat down. Dumbledore began, his voice solemn. "The Deathly Hallows, Harry, are 3 highly powerful magical objects supposedly created by death itself. Legend has it that they consist of the Elder Wand, an unbeatable wand, the Resurrection Stone, which can summon the spirits of the dead, and the Invisibility Cloak, which renders the wearer invisible." Harry listened intently, his thoughts quickly flashing to the invisibility cloak he'd inherited. "The cloak. I have one, from my dad," he said slowly. "Yes, Harry, your cloak is indeed the very one," Dumbledore confirmed with a nod. "And I have the other 2, holding up his wand with his blackened hand, upon which was a cracked ring." Harry's eyes widened further in astonishment as Dumbledore revealed the Elder Wand and the Resurrection Stone. The realization that he was in the presence of all 3 Deathly Hallows was overwhelming. "The Elder Wand," Dumbledore continued, holding up his wand. "It is said to be the most powerful wand ever created, capable of feats of magic beyond any other. But it is also a wand that has brought much grief and bloodshed, for it has a bloody and tumultuous history. It is drawn to power and has been the cause of many a wizard's downfall." Dumbledore then looked at the ring on his finger, his expression somber. "And this, Harry, is the Resurrection Stone. It can bring back echoes of the dead. But these are not the living. They are mere shadows of the dead, unable to interact with our world in any meaningful way. It's a dangerous object, Harry, for it tempts us with something we can never truly have. These Hallows, if united, would make one the Master of Death." "Master of Death?" questioned Harry, but Dumbledore cut in. "Voldemort will come for the wand. He must not get it." At that moment, there came a knock at the door as though struck by a heavy stick. "Come in," said Dumbledore. Gandalf stepped into Dumbledore's office with a presence that seemed to fill the room. His white robes shimmered faintly. "Ah, Gandalf," Dumbledore greeted, his tone a mixture of respect and relief. "To what do I owe this pleasure?" Gandalf nodded, his gaze briefly moving to Harry before settling on Dumbledore. In one hand he held his staff, and in the other he held his crystal ball. "I sensed a disturbance, a convergence of powerful forces," he said, his voice deep. "We must take counsel before we are beset on all sides, my friend. Please excuse us, Harry." "I will send Dobby when I'm done," said Dumbledore apologetically, dismissing Harry. Harry nodded, understanding the council of Dumbledore and Gandalf had begun. Chapter 3: Dumbledore and Gandalf, a Council of the Wise. They sat in the secluded office of the headmaster of Hogwarts, two of the greatest wizards of all time. Dumbledore of the wizarding world and Gandalf, a sage from an age-long past. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows across the room, creating an ambiance that was both comforting and eerie, a fitting backdrop for the weighty discussion that was about to unfold. Gandalf, his imposing figure cloaked in white, broke the silence that had settled between them. "Albus, enlighten me of your plight against the Dark Lord Voldemort. How fares the battle?" Dumbledore, his face appearing more lined in the dim light, leaned back in his chair. "Our situation, Gandalf, is indeed dire. Voldemort's power grows beyond imagination, and our efforts to stem his tide seem more akin to delaying the inevitable. The threads of destiny are entwined in a complex web, Albus. I have seen your struggles with the Deathly Hallows and the Horcruxes, but there is more at play than even you have perceived, and I'm sorry to say, it is a battle you cannot win. Not alone." Dumbledore's eyes grew wide. "How do you know of these things?" He raised the crystal ball in his hand and placed it upon Dumbledore's desk. "Through the Palantir, I have seen much. It is one of the original seeing stones of which your crystal balls are but pale imitation. I have glimpsed your adversary's strategies. His position is formidable. You have seen the Dark Lord and his plans? I have, and I have seen how things were meant to be before time was meddled with." "What do you mean time was meddled with? Meddled by whom?" Gandalf leaned forward, his voice now a soft, confessional whisper. "I must reveal to you, my friend, the extent of my actions in my world. You see, I was in a desperate situation, striving to change the course of the War of the Ring, which teetered on the brink of disaster," Gandalf recounted, his voice echoing the depth of his sorrow. "The enemy almost claimed the One Ring, and in a moment of desperation, I seized it and, in doing so, vanquished our foe. But it came at a great cost, the loss of many I held dear." Dumbledore's gaze was sympathetic yet filled with the understanding of a fellow bearer of burdens. "Such is the price of war, Gandalf. Oftentimes, our victories are drowned with sorrow." Gandalf sighed. "In my grief, I sought to undo the past, having wallowed in my grief for countless millennia. I turned the time turner back 50,000 years, hoping to bring back those I had lost and alter our dreadful outcome. Alas, my actions had unforeseen and dire consequences." Dumbledore, his expression somber, nodded slowly. "The manipulation of time is a dangerous endeavor, fraught with unforeseen outcomes." Gandalf continued, his voice heavy with regret. "In my efforts, I could not alter the fate of my friends. But worse, much worse, I unleashed an ancient evil into your world that I did not intend a foe, that should have remained buried in the bowels of history." Dumbledore's eyes widened slightly, a sense of realization dawning on him. "You speak of a force beyond Voldemort?" "Yes," Gandalf confirmed gravely. "In tearing apart the fabric of time, I inadvertently allowed the spirit of Sauron, corrupt and filled with malice, to endure. This spirit has now merged with Voldemort, making him far more dangerous than I could have imagined." Dumbledore leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Merged with Voldemort? When a soul is ripped from a body, it leaves behind a void which can be filled with spirits equally broken and uncontented with the finality of death. souls bent upon retribution and destruction of the pure and innocent. When Voldemort created his Horcrux, his body was no longer whole, allowing it to be occupied by a foe beyond this time. It is why Voldemort is far more formidable than he should be. So, I understand correctly, we face not only Voldemort but an ancient foe from your time? Indeed, our enemy is not the Voldemort that should have been. He is something far more dangerous, a fusion of dark powers from two worlds. His spirit is now bolstered by the cunning and malice of Saruman. Once amongst the wisest of my order, he fell into darkness long ago, corrupted by greed and power. This school is built upon the ruins of his ancient dwelling, on the borders of Fangorn Forest. Then how do we defeat him, if by destroying the fragments of his soul, his Horcruxes, we allow more of this entity, Saruman, to invade his being and make him stronger? There is only one way. We must release the fragments of soul that are trapped in these Horcruxes and destabilize his body. Both souls will vie for dominance of one body, perhaps destroying one another, or perhaps it will only make him stronger. I confess, I do not know which the likelier outcome, but it is the only way to untether them from immortality. If we simply destroy the Horcrux, then Saruman will have the chance he needs, once more raise his armies and establish his kingdom of Orthants. A long silence descended in the office as Dumbledore considered Gandalf's news. Eventually, his expression changed to one stricken with grief. Harry Potter, the boy marked by Voldemort, stands at the center of this conflict, Gandalf. He carries a fragment of Voldemort's soul within him, a piece that must be destroyed or removed to defeat Voldemort. I planned meticulously for years, ensuring the boy survived. But if your counsel is correct, I cannot see a way for Harry to survive the release of Voldemort's soul fragment. A tear ran down the long nose of Dumbledore. Gandalf smiled. I bring a glimmer of hope, Albus. I possess the means to extract this fragment from the boy. How? Asked Dumbledore, his face still etched with concern. As one might draw poison from a wound, I will draw out this tainted soul, cleansing the boy. You would suck out his soul. In a manner, yes. But at what cost? The loss of his life? Gandalf's eyes twinkled with a hint of his inherent wisdom. No, Albus. The boy who lived shall live. The removal of this fragment will not harm him. It's a delicate process, but within my power. Dumbledore's eyes lit up with a renewed sense of hope. Then we must act swiftly. At that moment, Dumbledore called out, Dobby! With a sharp crack, the free house elf appeared beside them, causing Gandalf, still on edge from their discussion, to react instinctively. With a swift motion of his staff, Gandalf inadvertently struck out, sending Dobby flying hard across the room. For a moment, confusion reigned. Dumbledore quickly rose from his chair, his expression a mix of concern and surprise. Gandalf, it's Dobby. He means no harm. Gandalf, realizing his mistake, lowered his staff, a look of mild regret passing over his face. My apologies, Dobby. My reactions were honed in a different time, a different war. Dobby, now nursing a large bump on his head, looked up with wide, pained eyes. Dumbledore, with a wave of his wand, gently eased the swelling and soothed the bruise. There, Dobby, that should feel better. Dobby nodded, still a bit dazed but visibly better. Dobby is sorry for startling the great wizard, sir. Dumbledore gave a small, reassuring smile. It's quite all right, Dobby. Please, could you fetch Harry for us immediately? Yes, Professor Dumbledore, sir, Dobby said, still a bit unsteady but obediently disappearing with another crack to fetch Harry. Once Dobby had left, Dumbledore turned to Gandalf, a wry smile on his face. Our world's surprises can be a bit jarring, even for a wizard of your stature. Gandalf, looking a tad sheepish, nodded. Indeed, Albus. The room settled back into a calm silence, awaiting Harry's arrival. The door finally opened, and Harry stepped in. "Harry, we have much to discuss," Dumbledore began. "But first, Gandalf has something he must do." Gandalf approached Harry, his staff in hand. With a few ancient words, a soft glow emanated from the staff's tip, enveloping Harry in a gentle light. The room fell silent, the only sound being the soft hum of magic at work. After a moment, Gandalf's staff drew forth a wisp of dark smoke from Harry's forehead. It swirled in the air before being sealed into a glass vial that Gandalf had produced from his robes. The deed was done. The fragment of Voldemort's soul was now contained. Harry blinked, feeling an immediate sense of relief, as if a great weight had been lifted from him. Dumbledore and Gandalf shared a look of quiet triumph. "Thank you," Harry whispered, his gratitude evident. Dumbledore placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. "Harry, you were an unintended Horcrux. Voldemort unknowingly transferred a part of himself to you the night he tried to kill you. But now, thanks to Gandalf, you are free of that part of him." Harry absorbed this revelation, a mixture of shock and relief washing over him. I don't know what to say." "There is nothing to say, Harry," Gandalf interjected kindly. "You have been brave beyond measure." Dumbledore gestured towards the door. "You should rest now, Harry. I must continue my talk with Professor Gandalf immediately." As Harry left the office, feeling lighter than he'd ever felt before, Dumbledore and Gandalf resumed their seats. "Thank you, Gandalf. A great burden has been lifted from me. My concern for Harry threatened at times my conviction for this war." Gandalf nodded, acknowledging Dumbledore's gratitude. "Now, Albus, we must prepare," Gandalf said, turning serious once again. "The road ahead will be challenging, and you cannot fight this battle alone, Albus. The enemy we face requires our combined strength." Dumbledore showcased his blackened, withered hand. "My strength has waned, Gandalf. Age and injuries have taken their toll, and I am no longer the wizard I once." Gandalf studied Dumbledore's withered hand gravely. "This will not do, Albus. We need you at your best if we're going to stand a chance in this war." Dumbledore sighed. "Alas, I have reached my limit. There is not much we can do other than to continue our resistance. Perhaps there is something we can do." Gandalf reached into the folds of his robe and produced an elven ring, its gem glinting in the candlelight. "Then accept this gift, Vilya, the Ring of Air. It was born by Gil-galad and Elrond, and now it is yours. It is an elven ring of healing." As Dumbledore slipped the ring onto the index finger of his blackened hand, a miraculous transformation occurred. The withered hand restored, his body seemed to regain the vigor of youth, though his eyes retained the wisdom of his years. "Together, Albus, we must confront this darkness. The fate of our worlds hangs in the balance." Dumbledore's eyes, wide with wonder behind his spectacles, felt an invigorating surge of strength. "What magic is this?" he asked in awe. "This is Vilya, one of the 3 rings of the elves. I entrust it to you, knowing you will use its power for the greater good. It will amplify your wisdom and heighten your perception." Dumbledore felt a sensation akin to a refreshing ocean breeze, invigorating his spirit and clearing his mind. It bestowed upon him a clarity and focus beyond anything he had previously known. "This is extraordinary, Gandalf. I am profoundly grateful for such a formidable gift, my dear friend," Dumbledore expressed, his voice full of gratitude. He gazed at his reflection in the mirror beside his desk, marveling at the transformation. The image staring back was that of his younger self, a man with brown hair, unburdened by age, his vision clear without the need for spectacles. Rising from his chair, Dumbledore extended his now restored hand, which Gandalf warmly grasped. "Together, we shall defeat this darkness, Gandalf." Harry Potter and the Elder Wizard, Chapter 4, The New Care of Magical Creatures Teacher. The castle buzzed with intrigue, whispers and rumors swirling like a mist. The news of Dumbledore's astonishing transformation had spread like wildfire, and every eye was fixed on the staff table, awaiting his arrival. "I heard he looks like a teenager again," said Seamus, making everyone laugh. "Maybe he'll ask you out for Valentine's Day, Hermione," smirked Ron. "At least he's not ginger," spat back Hermione, stung by Ron's words. As if on cue, the door swung open with a grandeur that silenced the hall. Dumbledore, with his newfound youth and vigor, strode confidently to the podium. His appearance was startling. Gone were the wrinkles and signs of age, replaced by the smooth skin and robust health of his younger years. Murmurs erupted, but a raised hand from Dumbledore brought instant silence. "Good morning, my young wizards and witches," Dumbledore began, his voice strong but now less old-sounding. "You may have noticed a certain change in my appearance. Last night, an old friend provided me with a gift that has rejuvenated me. I stand before you now, renewed and ready to defend our beloved school and the wider wizarding world against the darkness that encroaches." The hall erupted into whispers and gasps, the students exchanging looks of awe and disbelief. Change, however, is not limited to my person. Hogwarts itself must adapt for the times we face. In the coming days, you will notice several changes around the school. These are necessary to ensure our safety and to prepare us for the challenges ahead. With a final, reassuring smile, Dumbledore returned to his seat, leaving the hall abuzz with excitement and speculation. Later that morning, Harry, Ron, and Hermione made their way down to the grounds for care of magical creatures, discussing the potential changes Dumbledore was talking about. As they approached the usual spot, they stopped short. Gandalf, tall and commanding, stood beside another figure they didn't recognize, an ancient-looking wizard with a slightly eccentric appearance, cloaked in earthy tones and surrounded by a few curious creatures. "Gather round, everyone, and meet your new care of magical creatures teacher," Gandalf greeted them warmly. "This is Professor Radagast, the Brown, a fellow wizard from my world, skilled in the ways of wild beasts and changes of hue." Radagast, with a kind and somewhat absent-minded smile, nodded at them. "Pleased to meet you, young ones. I look forward to sharing the wonders of magical creatures with you." The students exchanged a mix of excited and bewildered looks. Another wizard from Gandalf's world? What other wonders and changes were in store for them? As the class proceeded, Radagast proved to be a knowledgeable and engaging teacher, introducing the students to creatures they had never before seen or heard of. His methods were unconventional but effective. He sat them down at the edge of the forest and told them of the wargs and goblins, of fell beasts and great eagles, and of Smog, the chiefest and greatest of calamities. After class, Hagrid, looking somewhat forlorn yet supportive, approached the trio. "It's all temporary, just till the war's over," he explained in his gruff voice. "Dumbledore reckons with Voldemort gathering forces. We need all the help we can get. I'm back to being the groundskeeper for now, keeping an eye on the borders." Harry, sensing Hagrid's mixed feelings, clapped a hand on his shoulder. "We'll still need you, Hagrid." Hagrid offered a small smile, patting Harry's back with a hand so large it nearly knocked him over. "Thanks, Harry. Just you wait. Hogwarts will be stronger than ever with all this help and Dumbledore being strong again. Just you wait." As they walked back to the castle, the trio discussed the changes. Hogwarts was evolving, preparing for a battle that loomed ever closer. With Gandalf and Radagast's arrival, they felt a mix of hope and uncertainty. The war was coming, but so were allies from beyond their world, bringing with them new strengths and mysteries. Above them, the castle stood tall and proud, a beacon of light against the coming darkness. With Dumbledore's renewed vigor and the wisdom of wizards from another world, Hogwarts was more than a school. It was a fortress, a symbol of resistance, and a home to those who would stand against the night. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but together they would face it. With a small pop, Dobby appeared beside Harry, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and urgency. Master Harry, Professor Dumbledore needs you and Professor Gandalf immediately, he squeaked, his hands raised defensively, as if expecting another accidental strike. Harry, concerned by Dobby's demeanor, nodded and followed the house elf, weaving through the corridors filled with the soft echoes of hundreds of years of magical learning. As they approached Dumbledore's office, the low, angry rumble of voices from within halted them. An unbreakable vow. Snape's voice was unmistakable, laced with dangerous fear and fury. I promise to protect Draco until he succeeds in the task the Dark Lord has given him. And if he fails, I must do it myself. I cannot break this vow, Albus. Dobby cowered, but Harry, driven by a mix of curiosity and concern, motioned for him to be quiet as they listened. Gandalf's voice then thundered in response, his tone as commanding as a storm. Be silent. Keep your forked tongue behind your teeth. I have not passed through fire and death to bandy crooked words with a witless worm. There was a stunned silence. Then Dumbledore's calmer voice cut through the tension. Severus, I understand the gravity of your situation. We must find a way to delay Draco's plans. We need time to devise a means to circumvent the consequences of breaking this unbreakable vow. Snape's response was a hiss of frustration. Time? How much time do we have, Albus? Draco is determined, and the Dark Lord grows impatient. If I fail to fulfill my vow, it will kill me. Dumbledore's tone was grave yet soothing. I am aware of the risks, Severus, but we have allies and wisdom on our side. Gandalf here has faced darkness that would wither the souls of most. We will find a solution. Harry's mind raced. The situation was more dire than he'd imagined. Snape, bound by an unbreakable vow to protect Draco and possibly kill Dumbledore. It was a tangled web of loyalties and threats that seemed impossible to unravel. He was about to knock on the door when it suddenly swung open, revealing Dumbledore, his eyes twinkling with an unreadable emotion. Harry, please come in, said Dumbledore, his voice calm but carrying an underlying urgency. Harry stepped into the office, the door closing behind him with a soft click. The room, usually filled with the sounds of various magical devices, was unusually somber. Dumbledore gestured for Harry to sit. Thank you for coming so promptly, he said, then turned his gaze to Snape. Severus, we will continue this discussion later. Snape's face was a storm of rage, but he nodded stiffly and turned to leave. As he passed Gandalf, the wizard's deep voice rumbled once more. Remember, Severus, you are of the line of Grima Wormtongue. Choose your words and your path wisely. Snape paused, his back rigid, then without a word, swept out of the room. With Snape gone, Dumbledore focused on Harry. Professor, what's an unbreakable vow? Asked Harry before he could stop himself. I know you have many questions, and in time, I hope to answer them all. But for now, I must ask you to trust me when I say some matters are not your concern at this moment. Harry nodded, understanding the finality in Dumbledore's tone. Dumbledore's face softened slightly. Thank you, Harry. Now, on to more pressing matters. We have located a Horcrux, one of the pieces of Voldemort's soul. Its acquiring is vital to weakening him and ultimately defeating him. Harry's heart raced. What do you need me to do, sir? I would like you to accompany Professor Gandalf and I to retrieve it, responded Dumbledore. Your connection to Voldemort might be crucial in locating it. When do we leave? Harry asked, a mix of anxiety and determination in his voice. Tonight, Dumbledore replied. The Order, along with the teachers, will be on guard while we are away. You must be discreet and quick. Go back to your dormitory, collect your cloak, and return here immediately. Without hesitation, Harry rose and hurried out of the office. On his way to Gryffindor Tower, he found Ron and Hermione and quickly pulled them aside. Listen, he said in a hushed tone. Dumbledore and Gandalf will be away from the castle tonight. They're going after a Horcrux, and I'm going with them. Stay on guard and keep this quiet. I have a feeling there might be trouble tonight. Ron's face was a mixture of concern and admiration, while Hermione looked worried. "Be careful, Harry," she said, her voice tense. "I will," he promised, before dashing off to his dormitory. Cloak in hand, Harry returned to Dumbledore's office. "Are you ready, Harry?" Dumbledore asked. Harry nodded, his hand gripping the cloak tightly. "Yes, sir." "Very well," said Dumbledore, standing up. He approached a cabinet and withdrew a small, intricately carved box. "We will be traveling by Portkey. It's a safer and more discreet way to travel under the current circumstances." As Harry prepared to step forward, Gandalf's gaze fell upon the cloak in his hand. "May I?" he asked, extending his hand. Harry handed the cloak over, and Gandalf examined it closely, his eyes narrowing with vague familiarity. "Ah, this is no ordinary garment," he remarked, as though recognizing an old possession. "An enchanted elven cloak of Lothlorien, if I'm not mistaken. A rare and valuable piece of craftsmanship." Harry looked surprised. "I knew it was special, but I didn't know its history." Gandalf smiled, a glint of appreciation in his eyes. "It will serve you well on our journey." He handed the cloak back to Harry, who now held it with a new sense of reverence. "Thank you, Professor." Gandalf stepped forward, his eyes reflecting the flickering light of the room. "The road ahead will be perilous, Harry. Keep your wits about you." "I will, sir." Dumbledore offered a small, sad smile. "Now, let's go." The three of them touched the portkey. There was a sudden jerk behind their navels, and the world whirled away. Their quest for the Horcrux had begun. Harry Potter and the Elder Wizard, Chapter 5, The Cave. The world was a storm of fury and noise as Harry, Dumbledore, and Gandalf approached the cliffside where the cave lay hidden, the cave Harry had seen in the memory Dumbledore had shown him. The sea churned below them, its waves crashing against the cliffs with a ferocity that sent sprays of cold salt water hurtling into the air. The sky, a dark canvas of ominous clouds, threatened with the occasional flash of distant lightning. The entrance to the cave was barely discernible against the dark, rocky backdrop. Dumbledore led the trio to the edge, his wand glowing softly in his hand. With intricate gestures and whispered incantations, the entrance widened, the sea momentarily calming at the mouth of the cave. "We'll have to swim across," Dumbledore's voice cut through the roar of the wind, barely audible over the tumult of the sea. Harry looked at the churning waters with a deep sense of dread. "Could you not conjure a boat, Professor?" "This is the problem with your generation, Harry. You're afraid of a little hard work," replied Dumbledore, a clear look of disappointment in his eyes. Gandalf beside him muttered under his breath about the cold and the wet, his stoic demeanor giving way to obvious discomfort. With a deep breath, they plunged into the icy waters. The cold was an immediate assault, the waves tossing them around with the force of the storm. Harry struggled against the water, fighting for every stroke, following the dim lights of Dumbledore and Gandalf, who swam with powerful and determined strokes toward the cave. The swim felt endless, but he pressed on, drawing on every reserve of strength and determination he had in the wake of being shamed by his headmaster. When they finally reached the relative calm at the opening of the cave, they clambered onto a rocky outcrop, taking a moment to catch their breath. Their chests heaved, and their hearts pounded from the exertion and fear. As they entered the cave, the air grew colder, the oppressive weight of the place pressing down upon them. They moved cautiously, aware of the magical protections that might lurk unseen. The path wound deeper into the earth, the walls of the cave closing in around them until they reached a large antechamber. In the center, a small lake lay still and silent, an island barely visible in the middle. Dumbledore paused, his eyes scanning the smooth rock wall that blocked their way forward. "This is not a natural formation," he murmured. "There's magic here, dark and old." He raised his hand, revealing a small silver dagger, and prepared to cut his palm, a necessary sacrifice to open the way. But Gandalf intervened, his hand closing gently but firmly over Dumbledore's. "Wait," Albus, there's more than one way to overcome such barriers. He stepped forward, his staff raised. The ancient wizard spoke a word of command, a word that seemed to echo from the very depths of the earth. The rock wall shivered, and then with a sound like a sigh, it parted, revealing the dark waters of the lake beyond. Entering, they turned the corner and a massive cavern opened up before them, revealing a vast underground lake. In the center, an island loomed, a solitary silhouette against the dimly lit waters. On it, they could just make out the outline of a small plinth. Dumbledore, his eyes sharp and searching, investigated the area, his wand illuminating the dark recesses along the shore. It was then that he discovered something hidden from ordinary sight, a small chain, partially submerged and almost indistinguishable from the rocks around it. With a knowing look, Dumbledore tapped the chain with his wand. There was a small clinking sound, and then, to Harry's amazement, a small boat began to emerge from the shadows, pulled towards them by the enchanted chain. It bobbed gently on the surface of the lake, seemingly waiting for its passengers. "This will carry us to the island," Dumbledore murmured. "Are you sure you don't want to swim, Professor?" asked Harry in mocking innocence, but failing to entirely disguise the sarcasm in his voice. Dumbledore scowled but did not respond. They climbed into the small vessel, the boat holding steady under their weight. Dumbledore released the chain, and it began to move of its own accord, gliding silently over the dark waters toward the island. Harry sat tense and alert, his eyes fixed on their destination, the sense of foreboding growing with every passing moment. He could feel the Horcrux's malignant presence calling out to them from the darkness. The journey across the lake was eerie and silent, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the side of the boat. The island drew closer, and with it, the culmination of their perilous task. When they finally reached the shore, the sense of dread was almost overwhelming. Dumbledore led them to the center, where the basin sat on an ancient pedestal. It was filled with a potion that shimmered with an unnatural light, beneath which they saw the locket sitting. "There's no way of getting to the locket without first drinking the potion," Dumbledore declared, after a couple minutes investigating the bowl. Harry watched, a horrible knot forming in his stomach, as the headmaster conjured a cup and began to drink the cursed liquid. Each gulp seemed to take a toll on him, his body shaking, his breaths becoming labored. Harry felt a surge of worry and helplessness, wishing there was something he could do to ease the headmaster's suffering. "The ring will protect him from the worst of it," comforted Gandalf. As Dumbledore consumed the potion, his features contorted in pain, a grimace etched deep into his face. Harry's heart raced with fear, his hands clenching into fists at his side. Gandalf stood beside them, a stoic guardian, his eyes ever watchful for the danger they all knew was coming. Then, as Dumbledore's sips became more labored and the basin finally emptied, a weak plea escaped his lips. "Water," he gasped, his voice barely a whisper. Harry, frantic with worry, glanced around the cavern. The only source of water was the lake surrounding them, dark and still. Without a second thought, Harry rushed to the water's edge, his hands cupping together, but as his fingers touched the surface, the calm water stirred and shapes began to emerge from the depths. Gaunt, ghostly figures, their eyes void of life, rose up from the lake. The Inferi, guardians of the Horcrux, had been disturbed by his attempt to take the water. The Inferi came, rising from the dark waters like nightmares brought to life. Gandalf sprang into action, Glamdring shining brightly in the dark cave. He fought with a fury that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring, cutting through the Inferi with each swing of his sword. Harry joined the fight, casting spells and pushing back the undead with every ounce of strength he had. When it was over and the Inferi were vanquished, they rushed to Dumbledore's side. He was weak, barely conscious, but his rejuvenated body held up better than it would have had he still been an old man. Gandalf quickly gave him some Miravor, and color slowly returned to his pale face. Dumbledore, though still visibly weak, seemed to regain most of his strength. The effects of the elven cordial Gandalf had administered, combined with the protection offered by the Ring of Velia and his recently regained youth, worked to heal him remarkably. His breathing steadied and color returned to his cheeks. His HP bar had been fully replenished. Once the immediate danger had passed and the last of the Inferi retreated into the Black Waters, Gandalf turned his attention to their situation. "Albus, we cannot linger here. Let's return to the school," he urged, his voice filled with concern. Dumbledore nodded. Suddenly, with a familiar sensation of being pulled through a tight tube, they apparated away from the island, leaving the dark cave and its horrors behind. They arrived amidst the familiar sights and sounds of Hogsmeade, but their attention was immediately drawn to the dark mark visible in the distance, casting an ominous glow over the tallest tower of Hogwarts. Harry's heart sank at the sight. The symbol of fear and death hovered above his school, signaling that danger was imminent. Dumbledore, now standing strong, his vitality visibly restored, looked toward the castle with a grim determination. Harry quickly secured them broomsticks from Madame Rosmerta, who sensed the urgency and did not ask any questions. Mounting the broomsticks, they took to the air, the wind whipping around them as they soared towards the castle. The journey was a blur, the landscape below passing in a rush of shadows and light. Harry's mind raced with worry and fear for his friends and fellow students at Hogwarts. As they landed on the tower, the air crackled with tension and the dark mark loomed ominously above. Without warning, a disarming spell struck Dumbledore. His wand flew from his hand, clattering to the ground, where Draco Malfoy quickly scooped it up. Dumbledore, with a swift motion, had managed to cast a freezing charm on Harry before being disarmed, keeping him hidden and immobile under the cloak, ensuring he wouldn't intervene. Harry, his heart pounding, could only watch as Draco faced Dumbledore, his wand pointing shakily at the headmaster. The situation was fraught with tension, the air thick with the weight of Draco's decision. The Death Eaters, their dark forms emerging from the shadows, pressed Draco to act, their whispers like venom spurring him on. As Draco struggled, torn between his orders and his conscience, Snape appeared. His face was a mask of unreadable intent as he approached Dumbledore. The moment was charged, a standoff that felt like the calm before a storm. Then, without warning, a deep bellow echoed through the tower. Gandalf, who had been momentarily out of sight, emerged with a fury unmatched. His staff raised high, he unleashed a powerful blast of magic that went off like a bomb. The Death Eaters, caught off guard, were flung like rag dolls, some careening off the tower into the abyss below. Draco, his resolve faltering at the sight of such raw power, was lifted off his feet and sent spiraling towards the edge, his scream piercing. Snape, in a flash of dark magic, transformed into an enormous bat, swooping down to catch Draco before he could hit the ground. He carried Draco away, disappearing into the night. The remaining Death Eaters, those who had managed to cling to the tower, scrambled to escape, their plans in disarray. Gandalf now stood in their midst unveiled, a figure in blinding white robes. Again, he unleashed Glamdring, and with a smooth sweep took off the head of Fenrir Greyback, instantly unaliving him and causing the other Death Eaters to scatter. Only one masked Death Eater remained, raising his wand to strike at the unarmed Dumbledore, but before the spell could leave his lips, Gandalf was upon him. With a swift, clean stroke, Glamdring cut through the air, and the Death Eater's arm was severed, falling to the ground with a sickening thud. The battle was over almost as quickly as it had begun. Several Death Eaters lay dead at his feet, only a handful managing to escape Gandalf's fury. The Death Eaters, those who survived, retreated into the night, their numbers diminished. The tower, once a place of quiet study of the heavens, had become a battleground, the scene of a fierce clash between light and dark. In the aftermath, Dumbledore, Harry, and Gandalf regrouped, their breathing heavy from the confrontation. Harry, no longer frozen, felt an enormous wave of relief. None of the order of his friends had been hurt in the attack. They had faced Death Eaters, retrieved a Horcrux, and survived. The war against Voldemort was far from over, but with Dumbledore's wisdom and Gandalf's power, they at least stood a chance. Back in Dumbledore's office, The first light of dawn had broken through the windows, casting a soft glow on the trio. They sat reflecting on the night's events. "We have achieved a great victory today, Albus, but I fear the final confrontation will not be so easy." "No, Gandalf, our situation is far more dire than you realize. I lost the Elder Wand to Draco. Should Voldemort claim it, I fear he will become unbeatable, with the spirit of Saruman aiding him even for our combined strength," responded Dumbledore gravely. Gandalf was silent for a moment. Then, with a sudden intensity, he spoke, "Not while I walk Middle-earth. I've come to you at this crucial turn of the tide, not to witness your defeat, but to aid you against the forces of evil. This Elder Wand, these Deathly Hallows, are more familiar to me than you might imagine." Dumbledore's eyes widened. "You know of the Hallows?" "I do, Albus. I was there at their inception. The tale of the Peverell brothers and the gifts I bestowed upon them have been twisted through the ages. But know this, the power they wielded, the power you fear now, is but a shadow of what truly was," Gandalf revealed, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken histories. "You were death?" Harry asked incredulously, his mind reeling from the revelation. Gandalf nodded solemnly. "I have been many things, Harry, and to many I have indeed been death. But the time of the Peverells was different. They showed courage and wisdom, and in return, I granted them rewards to aid their quest for a better world." He raised his staff, the ancient wood seeming to pulse with a deep inner light. "The Elder Wand was made from this very staff, which I hold." Gandalf held it aloft from them to see. "It possesses but a small portion of the staff's power. As for my strength, you have but seen glimpse of it." "You created the Deathly Hallows?" asked Dumbledore in awe. "Yes, even your cloak, Harry. It is a cloak of Lothlorien made by the Lady of the Woods, enchanted and imbued with the power of the One Ring." "And the Resurrection Stone?" asked Dumbledore. "Alas, I created the ring in my longing to speak to those I lost in the Fellowship. I have had long years to study ring lore and was eventually able to craft the ring. I spoke to my friends, who forgave me for failing them. When I met the second brother, I saw in his eyes the same lose I once felt, so I gifted him the Resurrection Stone. Unfortunately, he turned out to be an imbecile and took his own life." "Then perhaps all is not lost," said Dumbledore, a new spark of hope in his eyes, looking between Gandalf and the staff. "No, indeed it is not."
Thanks for joining us on this adventure. If you enjoyed the journey and are eager for more wild fan fiction, don't forget to hit that like button, share with your fellow fans, and subscribe for more episodes. And if you're as enchanted by the idea of Middle-earth meeting Hogwarts as we are, make sure to check out our series exploring this magical crossover. Your support brings these worlds to life. Until next time, keep the fantasy alive.